Welcome to the King's Men Podcast, changing lives for the kingdom of God, becoming a better producer, protector, and provider for your family. Because pain is just weakness leaving the body. Exclusive insight and commentary for the Christian male. Change your life. Live better lives. Become a happy man. Roar like the lion you are. Now, let's get started.
And again, welcome back to the Kingsman Podcast. If you're listening to this should be a Tuesday, because I have broken out each segment to be a day of the week. And so Tuesday is the protector segment. What does it mean to be a protector? You protect your family. Oftentimes that doesn't mean just with a firearm. Oftentimes that doesn't mean that you have to, get physical with it. That sounds like a song, doesn't it? Getting physical with it. You know, Will Smith should come out with something like that. Or Weird Al should do a parody of that, getting physical with it. The reality is that you have to protect your family from a lot of things. The one thing I want to talk about today is liberalism. Frankly, and you guys probably know this already because I am probably preaching to the choir. But that is okay, because I like the choir. But if we're preaching to the choir, you already know that liberalism is a mental illness. You might be saying, hey, Jim, you're being really harsh. No, I'm actually being very merciful, very generous. See, you have to come to my church, sit in one of my Bible studies, if you really want to understand how the liberal mind works. There are two possibilities in life. That's important for you to understand that when it comes down to all presuppositions of possible thinking, there are only two options that are available to you. Now I'm going to give you some fancy $10 words. If you're driving, don't stop and write them down. You can always just re-listen to the podcast, get the information that you need later on. The first place in which you can receive information is called autonomous epistemology. Autonomous just means it comes from yourself. Autonomous, self. And epistemology is just a fancy word for saying what is the theory of how we achieve knowledge. How do we get knowledge? How does knowledge come into our brain? It comes from an exterior source, and we learn from it. We have observations. We use our senses. There's all kinds of different theories that come from it, but there are only two methods in which we believe that knowledge can come from. There's only two possibilities. Now, a lot of philosophers out there might say, oh, it's a false dichotomy. No, it's not a false dichotomy. There's only two places in which knowledge can come from. A lot of unbelievers want to say there's only one place that knowledge can come from, and that would be the autonomous epistemology. And so I'm sorry to bore you with all this nerdy philosophical information. However, the other place in which knowledge can come from is called theonomous epistemology. Theo meaning God, and that's the Greek word for God. If you're ever on Jeopardy and you needed to know that, the Greek word for God is theo. So it's theonomous epistemology. Theonomous epistemology. Yeah, say that 10 times fast. The thing about that is a belief that you are revealed information, or at least the foundation for building knowledge, is revealed to you from an exterior source, and that source being God. That's theonomous epistemology. Those are the only two possibilities that you have. You have to be revealed information, or information is just within yourself. The problem with self is it ultimately leads to the special pleading fallacy, or taxi cab fallacy, or circular reasoning fallacy, all kinds of different fallacies. And that is the liberal mind right there. And everything is said and done, when you ask that question, why this, why that, why do you believe this, eventually you're going to get down to a set of values that they cannot account for, they cannot justify for, and that is because they are using autonomous epistemology, and that is the problem. So what I want to review here is a couple months ago I got the book by Ben Shapiro. Love Ben Shapiro. He's a great guy. Wish he was a Christian. Ben, please. I want to meet you in heaven, please. Ben Shapiro, great book though. I mean, the guy is fantastic, and he is a wonderful debater, and I'm glad he's on our side, man. The guy is just fantastic. So he wrote a book. It's called 11 Rules for Winning the Argument. So it's basically a rule book for arguing against the left. And you know what? I think he hits things spot on. So I want to go over some of those things in order to give you an idea of how to protect your family from liberalism, and how liberals think, and how to win in some of these debates, all right? Because that's your responsibility, not only as a Christian, because you don't have to be a Christian to listen to this podcast in order to glean these conservative principles that are coming out. Just understand that, if you believe in conservative principles, where did you get them? You got them from Christianity. So, a lot of times conservatives just don't fight back. And that is such a problem in this world today. Christians, let me allow me to relate this to you. In the early church, guys did not just sit back and be pew sitters. They absolutely were not. The church was not a group full of pew sitters. They were known for taking barges out on the rivers in Rome and being underneath bridges whenever the immoral Roman women would throw their unwanted babies over the bridge in order to murder them. The Christians were down there below with fishing nets to fish them out of the water and save their lives. Christianity was a seriously active faith. Something that we lost today. Why? Because we just don't want to fight anymore. We don't want to be aggressive in our faith because we somehow, toxic masculinity says that aggression is wrong. Aggression is not wrong. No, you actually have to go out there and fight for your faith. You have to fight for what is right. You have to actually be going. I'm not saying, arm yourself, although it is a Christian principle to be armed. Or be violent with anybody, no, but you have to be active in your faith. And when you are faced with falsehood, it is your responsibility. It is incumbent upon you in order to act. Because it is immoral. If you see something immoral happening to someone else and you don't act, what does that say about you? What does it say about your character? Do you really love God? And God says you have to love justice and judgment. And I know there's a lot of people that judge not, lest you be judged. Please spare me the ignorance of context that people use that verse with. God loves judgment. The Bible says that. So a lot of times, conservatives, they just don't think about how to win. They don't even think about having a debate. They don't want to have a debate. It's too time-consuming. It costs them too much. So they don't think about winning, and so they constantly lose. We have to start thinking about winning, guys. We have to start thinking like winners. Winners believe in themselves. Winners push forward. And so that's the first principle that I gleaned from this book. Now, we're not going to get through everything because even though the book is a short read, this is a short podcast. So now let's assume for a moment that you're the typical American voter. You care more about Miley Cyrus and her twerking videos on YouTube or the Video Music Awards than you do about Obamacare. That's the typical American. Let's assume all you've really seen about the elections is the coverage that the mainstream media has given you and what the candidates said about each other during the debates. That's the typical American. That's a problem. You really should educate yourself before you pull that voting lever. Before you mark those check boxes on the computer that you vote with now. We're really not interested in debating what is right or wrong in this country anymore. We're afraid to have a conversation. We're afraid that it's going to be labeled as hate speech, and oftentimes it is being labeled as hate speech. But guys, if we don't band together, if you don't band together with other guys, how are we going to make a change and protect the lives of our children? How are we going to make sure that the church continues for the next 30 years if people don't think about these issues, if people don't talk about these issues? And for Christianity to be labeled as hate speech is ridiculous. Where do these freedoms come from? came from Christianity. They need to be interested in debating. You need to be interested in debating personally. So, when a leftist argues with you, when a liberal argues with you, it comes from their immoral, unearned sense of moral superiority over you. I don't know where it comes from. That is narcissism. Narcissism comes from the autonomous epistemology framework, worldview, and that's what they think about. That thing that gives them pleasure, that thing that builds themselves up, that rather than breaking themselves down, because that's the difference between theonomous epistemology and autonomous epistemology. One is just being self-centered, full of yourself, narcissistic, nihilism. All of that comes from that framework of thinking. Whereas when you realize that you need to be humbled before God because He's the one who's revealed everything to you, well, that's quite humbling. And it's not coming from you, and even though it is for you, you can't think of yourself as something great because God knew it before you did. When a liberal calls you a racist or a sexist or a bigot or a homophobe, that gives them a sense of satisfaction with their status in the universe. Oh, they're breaking down barriers. They're being the social justice warriors that they are. Even if they never help a single individual human being in their life, it just makes them feel good. They're directly putting an end to racism and bullying. Well, in reality, what they're doing is bullying you. When someone calls you a racist, a sexist, a bigot, a homophobe, because you happen to disagree with them about tax policy or same-sex marriage or abortion, that's bullying. Yeah, that's bullying. No, I'm not saying that, we should be able to handle that, guys. We got to not be that snowflake generation that keeps crying to themselves just because someone called them a bad name. So what? Now, when someone slanders you because you happen to disagree with them about global warming or the government shutdown, now that's all bullying. And what you'll find is autonomous epistemology will usually be self-contradicting. They're going to call you a bully. That's because they're bullying you. It always comes down to something that is self-contradictory. That's why liberalism is a mental disorder. When someone labels you as a bad human being because they disagree with you, they're bullying you. They are attacking your character without any justification, and that's nasty. In fact, it makes them a nasty person, doesn't it? So when someone comes, oh, you're just making fun of gay people. No, I'm disagreeing with them. Context. Why are you bullying me? I'm not bullying you, you're bullying them. No. I just gave the truth and the facts. How's that bullying? You replied with a non sequitur. Sorry, I'm having my hot caffeine to clear my throat and keep it finely tuned because it is an instrument. And it's so good, even though it's made with Splenda. Sugar bad, Splenda okay, I guess, until my liver falls out, right? Conservatives, they don't want to debate those issues. They just want to portray you as being personally ignorant, bigoted, corrupted, and that's the narrative that they tend to follow after. They create a set of characters that you believe in, like that you even like and you want to hang out with. And that's just a narrative. Hollywood twists our newfound friends into exemplars. What I mean is, when you go out to the mainstream media, what you're going to see is you're going to find people that are relatable to things in your life, tragedies that happen, and then all of a sudden they come out with this liberal philosophy. Like, whoa, where did that come from? Well, to a lot of people, they're just using bias in order to educate people. What it is social engineering, and Hollywood twists all of these people all the time. They'll create a character on television that seems okay, and for the first 2 seasons, and then in the 3rd season, all of a sudden, hey, they come out homosexual, they come out very liberal, or they're against abortion, or they're for abortion, and doing all of these things. And after you've had 2 years of becoming really good friends and acquaintances with the star that you have on the television, all of a sudden you find yourself, oh wow, he makes an interesting point, and not really thinking it through. And that's the way Hollywood does social engineering in your life, and so you have to be very careful of that. So when you like a character, and when Hollywood gives you emotional appeals, you're supposed to like that character. You're supposed to really relate to that character. But Hollywood is not in the business, or should not be in the business, of social engineering, and should not be in the business of doing sex education for you and your children's mind. But that's Hollywood. That's what Hollywood does best. You should always debate a leftist if there is an audience. This is straight out of Ben Shapiro's book. Because you are a representative. You are a representative of conservatism. I know it's tough. I know it's very difficult to do that. And a lot of people, that's their greatest fear, is to speak in front of people. But if there is an audience, they are watching you. The goal of the debate, a public debate, is not to win over the leftist, or to convince him or her, or to be friends with him and her. That person already disagrees with you, and they probably won't change their mind. They won't be convinced by your words of wisdom, because they don't have wisdom. They have a mental disorder. They won't be impressed with your sparkling rhetoric, or even the facts that come out of your mouth. The goal in a public debate is always to destroy the leftists in public in a way that is as humanely as possible. Okay? Now, Christians, let me give you an example from this. Justin Martyr. He is from the 2nd century, late 2nd century, of the early church. This was a Roman philosopher who went through life went through one philosophy system to another until he found Christianity, and he said, that's it. This is the ultimate philosophy. And he embraced Christianity because it is the ultimate philosophy. Nothing else makes sense outside of Christianity. And so he, during the time of persecution, opened up a school in Rome. And during that time of persecution, he wrote a letter to the emperor, basically saying, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not giving a verbatim quote, paraphrasing, he says, this is Christianity. You don't like it? Come get me. Here's where I am. Now that takes moxie. That takes moxie. He's saying, I know the truth. I can legally defend it. And when the Romans came for him, not just him, but several of his followers, the disciples under that school, went with him. And they were all martyred. They were killed for the faith. He was willing to stand up because he absolutely found the absolute truth in the universe. And he understood it. But here we are. We're afraid to have a public forum with other people. We have come a long way since the early church times. One of Ben Shapiro's rules when arguing with a leftist or winning an argument is number 1, walk towards the fire. You know, I gotta stop saying so much. But firemen, they walk towards the fire. Policemen go towards the action. The military stand firm and continue to move forward in time of battle. Let there be no mistake. We are in a fight. We are in a war. We must continue on. We must carry ourselves forward. The late Andrew Breitbart taught Ben Shapiro that lesson. And he was a very clever tactician who understood that he understood the fight at the very gut level. He got that politics is warfare by other means, and that you have to treat it like it's war. And you have to treat it like it's war, because it is. If Satan is out there like a lion and he's ready to pounce on you and he's using left liberalism, you got to be ready for that. You have to be ready to give a defense of your faith. Absolutely. Breitbart would also explain how you're going to get hit with the slings and the arrows of outrageous fortune no matter which way you turn. You can try to hide from the attacks of the left. You can try to outrun them. You can attempt to ignore them. You can pretend that the left has reached some sort of quasi-consensus in which they want to live and let live. And that will last until the protesters are outside of your own business. You understand me? They're gonna say yes, peace, peace, until they're right outside of your own business. They're gonna try to trick you into making you believe something that isn't true, and the untruth is that they're okay with the way things are. They will shut you down if they can. Just ask the Colorado cake baker who stood against making a homosexual cake. And then you realize all of a sudden that they were not willing to live and let live. That just simply wasn't the case. Rule number 2 of Ben Shapiro's 11 rules. I like it. Hit first. Hit first. Oh, that's so un-Christ-like, really? Have you read about Jesus in the temple overturning tables? Have you read that part? Tell me. What does it mean to be Christ-like if we're not really ready to go out there and call a spade a spade? If we are not ready to say, hey, homosexuality is a sin. How dare you? Because the reality is we're telling people that it's okay to sin. If we shut our mouths, then we are condoning the action. If we don't say something against it, we are condoning that action. Again, example from the early church fathers, they were all willing to write to the emperor and tell them what for. To tell them why they believe what they believe and how no one is going to convince them otherwise. That takes moxie, and that also, they were hitting first. They were the ones who were petitioning the government, saying, hey, this is what we believe. No, we're not sacrificing babies. No, we're not having wild orgies. No, we're not doing any of these things. And you have to read the early church fathers in order to understand exactly what I'm saying. But none of that was happening in Christianity. And if you don't like it, here I am. Come get me. Again, Polycarp, early Christian church father. He was a disciple right under the Apostle John. He got tired of running. So when the guards came for him, he actually made the guards a nice, great meal. He set the entire dinner table for them. Yeah, come on in, have something to eat, and then we'll go, and you can execute me. The only thing Polycarp missed was taking the Lord's Supper when he was in prison. Now that's a man who was willing to hit first. You know, that doesn't mean that we're being overly aggressive. No, it just means that, hey, we're out there and we're saying what needs to be said. We are telling you that your house is on fire. Your house is on fire. Another sip of hot caffeine. Love it. Rule number 3, frame your opponent. Frame your opponent. In fact, you've lost the argument the minute you engaged in it. The proper response to a charge of racism is not, I'm not a racist, never have been. I have black friends, black bosses, black employees. You've already given away the store by dignifying the charge with a response. The proper response to a charge that you beat your wife is not to explain that you don't beat your wife and are in fact an ardent feminist, it's to point out that throwing around accusations without evidence makes your opponent a piece of garbage. That's exactly right. Frame him. Whenever a liberal sits there and says, hey, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, well, you're just throwing out accusations without evidence. What does that make you? You frame your opponent based upon what they have said. You know, the truth is on your side. The truth is always on your side. They want to label you without evidence. And we sit there, we just sit there and start going into defense mode instead of being on the attack mode. Hey, you said that without any evidence. What's your evidence that I'm a racist? What's your evidence that I'm a homophobe? How do you define homophobia? And you get them all the way down to see how their argument is simply autonomous epistemology. And it's fallacy of special pleading. It's meaningless. Because what they want to do is they want to label you. Because that's what they think is going to win over the crowd. The mob rule. But we can't allow that to happen. You need to be able to punch back. Punch back and say, okay, what's your evidence? The favorite 3 lines of a liberal is like, you're stupid, you're mean, or you're corrupt. Sarah Palin is supposedly stupid. Mitt Romney was supposedly mean. Dick Cheney was supposedly corrupt. You take away any of those 3 lines of attack, and they have nothing, no evidence whatsoever. The left is completely inconsistent. And you have to be able, and this brings us to rule number 5. It's the last one I'm going to cover because I'm running out of time. Rule number 5 is spot the inconsistencies in the left's argument. The goal is to make the left admit once and for all that they believe what they believe about the policy by exposing those inconsistencies. You're just a homophobe, yeah, but I thought you were against labels. And I thought you were against bullying. Why are you bullying me? I'm not bullying you. Then why'd you call me a homophobe? This is the reality that we have in our lives. These people live among us, and they don't think. Always force leftists to answer questions that will lead them down the road of showing their inconsistencies of their arguments. And don't get distracted by anything else. Don't allow them to try to change the narrative on you. If you follow this strategy, you'll do pretty good. If you follow this strategy, you might actually make some converts to the right way of thinking. Hey, thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Hey, thanks for listening to the Kingsman Podcast. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort in order to get this done. But at the end of the day, it's about you bettering yourself as a man, being a better father, being a better husband, being a better member of your church and your community. These things are important if we're going to make it into the next century. Number 1, become a Christian. If you're not a Christian and you're listening to this, think about it. Contact a local church. Contact me if you need help finding a good local church. Like us on Facebook. You can visit Truth Bombs. We're available on Facebook. We also have a closed group called The Kingsmen. You have to be invited in order to get on that, so you can contact me directly at jettrooper@hotmail.com. That's JETTROOPER @hotmail.com. And you can get on there with another group of guys, encourage one another, receive the latest and greatest information for the Kingsmen. But most of all, I'm praying for you. So you can go to truthbombs.wordpress.com. You can see all my links to my articles. You can hear all my podcasts there as well. Whatever platform that you're on, please like us, star us, give us a review, rate us, whatever your platform allows. Let's hear back from you. And thanks again for listening. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Now, when I was trying to get my podcast off the ground, I had so many questions. How do I record an episode? How do I parse the episode out? Where do I find background music to use that won't cost me an arm and a leg? How do I get onto Apple Podcast, onto Spotify, and every other platform that people like to listen to? The biggest question was, how do I find advertisers? The answer to every one of these questions is really very simple, and it's Anchor. Anchor is the one-stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing, and monetizing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free to you and 100% ridiculously easy to use. The thing I really like the most is the way that when you're recording a podcast, you can break it out into different segments, including the all-included segment transition music and even Spotify music that you can directly include in. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast, go to anchor.fm/start. That's anchor.fm/start to join. And you can join me and a diverse group of community of podcasters already using Anchor. And that's anchor.fm/start. Now, I can't wait to see your podcast.